As you were mentioning about how the government hands information over to the press, I remember down in the United States when my wife and I were down there, that Bush allegedly disbanded this organization that the U.S. government had founded, which gave stories to the press. Mm-hmm. But behind officially that would happen, but unofficially, a lot of the press has later been proven to be nothing more than probably one of the best fictional novels ever written. Right. Mm-hmm. With that said, you said something about shadow governments. I remember running into a gentleman who used to be the leader of this group called the Phoenix Group. Mm-hmm. In Vietnam, he was in charge of deciding which areas would get bombed. The way that they gave this gentleman a retirement gift, right? They turned around and one of his so-called best friends turned around and said, "Here, hold on to these stocks, and I'll come back and I'll get them." And all of a sudden, the police showed up, and the stocks he's holding on to, he got nailed for insider trading.
Good God.
And as he ends up in jail, the next thing you know, they broke both his hands.
Oh.
So, and then the next person that took over after him in this Phoenix organization, we met his son at the same time. So when we were in Las Vegas, we met a lot of interesting people. But I was wondering have you ever heard of any other shadowy groups that basically are out there, which the mainstream people may not know of? That just a few names, because when stuff starts hitting the fan, it's a good idea to know which groups are behind this, but their names.
Yeah. I mean, certainly there are informal groupings. They tend to sort of formulate themselves as think tanks. Probably one of the most notorious is the Council for Foreign Relations, which is a sort of transatlantic organisation to which very senior politicians and businessmen and statesmen get invited to join. I think that was set up by Brzezinski, I think. There's also, in the UK, there's something called Chatham House, which is a similar type of think tank, again, very transatlantic, sort of American, UK, and the Anglo-Saxon countries in Europe. And of course, most notoriously, I suppose, recently, there's an organisation called the Bilderberg Group. Now, this is something that was out there on the internet as a conspiracy theory for about the last decade. Everyone said, "Oh, you're a nutter if you think such a thing would exist." And the premise of the Bilderberg Group is that world leaders, business leaders, royalty, and those who are probably the future's movers and shakers get together once a year for an informal discussion about where the world's going, what the next big issues are going to be, how they're going to respond to them, which wars they're going to fight, that sort of thing. As I said, for a long time, everyone thought this was some mad conspiracy theory. And now it's been proven. In fact, they met very recently, I think, in Greece. Yeah. That they do this. And again, these are people who are democratically elected to represent us as part of our government, going off and making undemocratic decisions with other heads of state or big business or whatever, with no oversight, no accountability, and no reporting back. So we don't know what they are deciding for us in our name. And it's highly undemocratic, and this is a problem. But again, this comes, as I said, this was something that was seen as a conspiracy theory for a while, and now it's just proven mainstream fact. These things go on.
One thing that really shocks me is that George Orwell came from Britain. He wrote the book, my favorite novel of all time is called 1984. Yeah. He also wrote Animal Farm. It's another good novel to read. Yet what happens, you're seeing what's happening in Britain. I remember you talked about it earlier about the police state. And so everything that he wrote and he had envisioned is now coming into reality in Britain.
Pretty much. I actually read the book for the first time in 20 years last year, just to see how much of it had come true, and it was frightening. You could tick off most of the novel, pretty much. We've even got to the point, we mentioned CCTV earlier, where you're watched on the streets, but now they're trialling ones that talk at you. So it's a bit like the two-way screen in Winston's flat, Winston Smith's flat, where they can monitor what his activities in the privacy of his own home. So you have CCTV cameras where the police are watching you from a control room. If they see you doing something they don't like or that might be illegal, or even just dropping litter, they will say something over the CCTV and order you to do something differently. And of course, as well, we also have electronic surveillance, which is becoming endemic. Now, when I worked for MI5, if you wanted to bug someone's home or put a bug in their house, on their telephone, you had to get the prior written permission of the democratically elected political master of the organisation, it's the Home Secretary in the UK. So you had to get what was called a warrant in order to put this intercept on the line, so which wasn't perfect, but at least gave some sort of basic democratic oversight to the process. Now in 2000 we have another law that's come in called the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, RIPA. And under this, it's expanded massively so that without warrants, they can look at your internet traffic, they can look at your telephone records, all that sort of thing. And this was supposed to be put in place just to bring up the old laws into line with the internet age. Now, what we found instead is that it's not just the counter-terrorism agencies that are using and abusing this law, but over 800 public bodies across the UK are routinely using RIPA to spy on their citizens. And when I say public bodies, I mean even down to their local town council can use what was supposed to be there to protect national security against terrorism to spy on people living in their borough, up to and including putting a telephone tap on some householders to see if they lived in a certain address, to see they weren't trying to cheat their way into getting their kid into school in a good catchment area, and also fishermen being spied on to see if they were taking more than their quota of shellfish off the beaches, which is crazy. I actually read a piece on my blog about that, about cockle rustlers under surveillance. But how can... Well, of course, I know how they can. We have laws which are in place which can be used by these public bodies, and of course they will use them because they have the power to do so. You know, you give them an inch, they will take a mile, and that's why we have to be eternally vigilant and not allow these laws just to crash through Parliament. And suddenly we wake up finding we are living in a police state where people can listen to us in the privacy of our own homes for no good reason.
Yeah, when President Obama was recently elected down in the United States, he had promised the Congress and the senators 5-day period to read the bills. But however, it's amazing how some bills have been forced through and this one rule has not been paid attention to. But quickly, talking about the internet, when I was down in the United States, I had a gentleman, obviously well-dressed Afro-American gentleman, must be from a think tank, came up to me one time and he was saying that the CIA had handed over the surveillance equipment over to Canada. Canada turned around and developed it further, then handed it back to CIA. So in other words, Canada had the ability to monitor the internet prior to September 11th, 2001. With that in mind, that means that someone would have had to know that something big was coming down in September 11th and did nothing to stop the crime. So therefore, they would be guilty themselves as war criminals for allowing this action to happen.
Well, in fact, our countries have illegally waged aggressive war, which is, there in black and white under international law. If we then fund our country's governments to commit these crimes, which, crimes against humanity, crimes against peace, crimes of genocide, by paying our taxes to them, we are accessories to those crimes. So in fact, there's a campaign in the UK called Make Wars History, which is currently encouraging people to withhold their taxes. Not to pay the tax, but to put it in a court account. Say, look, we've handed the money over, but we were not giving this money to the government while it's breaking war laws. And that's gaining some traction. It's quite an interesting one. But yes, in terms of electronic surveillance, as I mentioned before, there's supposed to be this notion of democratic oversight where you get a warrant to bug someone or to look at their internet communications. Now, what we have between our countries, the US, Canada, UK, Australia and New Zealand, is an electronic cooperation. It's called the echelon system. This basically means that in the UK, you want to bug a UK person, you have to get a warrant. However, the US doesn't because it's an overseas intercept, or the Canadians don't. It's an overseas intercept. So Canada could spy on a UK citizen and then share that product. So there's no democratic oversight. UK can spy on the Canadian citizens and give that information to the Canadian intelligence agencies. So it's a very, very clever way of going around any sort of democratic and legal oversight. And that's what this echelon system's about.
We only have a couple minutes left. Can you quickly leave our listening audience with your website address so that way they can go and look at it, and also any email address you may want to leave the listening audience with, just in case they have questions to ask that I haven't covered today?
Yeah, sure. My website is just www.anniemachon.com, which is ANNIEMACHON.com. And there is an email address on that website, actually, if people want to get in contact with me. And I write about a lot of these issues in greater depth, and as well as putting lots of interviews and all that sort of thing on. So, yeah, please do go and have a look.
What is your thoughts? At this time, North America, we're heading towards this North American Union that a few people want to force upon us, and the only thing that's stopping them at this time is the brave citizens standing up and voicing their opinion against it. They actually have the Euro at this time waiting to come into effect. All that's going to happen is a gigantic false flag is going to happen. Next thing you know, the system's going to crash, and also in regards to the economical crash that's going on right now, we were warned by the there's a Scottish bank that we were warned about all that stuff. So what do you vision happening? We only have about 2 minutes left. What do you vision happening that could cause our systems to collapse all of a sudden, and the Euro will be put forth, and next thing we know, we're sitting in the North American Union?
Well, I'm no economics expert, but I know that China's bought up a lot of the US Treasury bonds, and if they chose to pull the plug on the US economy, they could at any minute. Also, I suppose as well, if the petrodollar monopoly were to disintegrate, so for example, Iran has started trading oil in euros, Russia started trading some of its energy in rubles. So if the petrodollar monopoly just goes, then America is screwed financially. That could be a trigger. But yes, of course, there could be some sort of false flag as well, or some sort of cyber attack as well. I mean, people are talking about a sort of false flag on the internet. And there are rumours that the US already has the equivalent of the Patriot Act, which would clamp down free use of the internet, which is ready on the blocks to go, just like the Patriot Act was straight after 9/11, even though it was about 1,000 pages long. It had been pre-written. So I think we just need to be eternally vigilant. The old quote about those who give away their liberties to safeguard their securities deserve neither.
Benjamin Franklin
wrote that. It's becoming more and more pertinent. So please, everybody, get active and get responsible and take your democratic power back before we have no option.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come in as a guest today. It's Co-op Radio 102.7 FM CFRO, Monday Brown Bagger. My name is Reginald Angus Argue. It's May 25th, 2009, and that was Annie Machon. And until I talk to you guys again in about 3 weeks' time, have a great day.